We got one excited person. Appreciate everybody coming out on a cold morning. We talked about it. I'm going to pick on Denise a little bit. I said the weather outside is frightful. And what did she say? Sing it to me, Denise.
The fire in my heart is so delightful.
All right, so that's where we're starting today, right? That's pretty exciting. Well, I appreciate everybody coming out. So First Fridays is, near and dear to me as the executive director here. And we put a lot of effort into making sure that we get people together, especially leaders, to meet someone new and learn something new. And I was thinking this morning, and on the way to work, I was thinking about the holidays and Thanksgiving and everything that was going on. And all of a sudden, my truck was like, dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee. It said pre-collision covered or something and sensor something. And I was like, huh. And then, of course, that's an analogy that I started thinking, I'm like, you know what, it's kind of like the holidays, right? Is there so much grime and stuff that goes on in people's lives? Like, this isn't happy for everybody, but it is cheerful for a lot of people. And I was like, so now I have a sensor that's dirty, and I got to clean it off. And I think there's so much stuff with social media and shopping and Black Friday, all this stuff that just comes during the holidays. So then when I got here, I was like, you know what? ChatGPT is pretty important these days, right? Everybody's using it. And I was like, I'm going to type in what is the true meaning of the Christmas holiday. And I'm going to read this to you guys because it was very eye-opening. And so ChatGPT, it goes from Christians to people that, just have a general faith or no faith. So I put in, what is the meaning, it fell off, meaning of Christmas holiday? I'm a little slower typing than it is giving me an answer. So it says the meaning of Christmas. Christmas is celebrated as the day of Christians believe Jesus Christ was born, a moment of hope, love, and light entering the world. But over time, its meaning has also grown to include themes that everyone can appreciate. Spending time with loved ones, sharing kindness and generosity, reflecting on gratitude, and bringing joy to others. At its heart, Christmas is about love, giving, and togetherness, celebrating what truly matters in your life. So I took all of that and I said, you know what, there's a lot of stuff that comes in during the holidays. But at the end of the day, it's about us and how we treat people. And then so guess what? Now you guys are getting a frame of how my brain works. Now I'm like, okay, I'm getting ready to sit with a bunch of leaders in Fort Wayne. And then I was like, you know what? I don't have to type anything into ChatGPT. It's all right there. The meaning of Christmas and what we do, the togetherness, the kindness, and the focus on other people. That's what we should do 365 days a year, right? It's not just this time of year. Is how can we be leaders in the community that spread this joy and faith and togetherness from today all the way, and not just wait till the end of the month, right? So take this opportunity to think about that and reflect, because there's other people that are out there that are challenging through the holidays, right? It's not all bunny rabbits and rainbows. So, but you can be that person. You can be that kindness. You can be that togetherness that can be there for them. So take that opportunity to do that. And so I really appreciate you guys coming to First Fridays, because those messages to me are what makes us foundational to the community, is the people like you that go out and spread the love and kindness that I believe to be my faith in Jesus and getting out there. So thank you guys so much for being here today. I'm going to turn it over to Denise so she can introduce our speaker, and then we'll jump into learning something new today.
Thank you. I don't need that. That's a great segue when we talk about spreading love and joy and hope, because Cheri's going to talk about communication and effective communication strategies, how it can help you personally and professionally. Dr. Cheri Hampton-Farmer is the CEO of Communicating Matters, which of course it does. She's a speaker, consultant, executive coach, and author. Her coaching elevates team performance, culture, and impact through strategic communication. Over the years, she has provided workshops, coaching, consulting, and has been a keynote speaker for Fortune 500 companies. She also contributes in our local community, and she'll tell you a little bit more about her background through her stories and such. But she's very good at what she does. Clients achieve professional and personal growth. I'm certain we will all have takeaways today. So, she's also my friend. I'm thrilled that she's here today. Help me welcome Dr. Cheri Hampton.
Well, silence is not golden. It's expensive. In fact, the Gallup World Report cited that because of disengagement and silence, we're losing $500 billion worldwide. That's how expensive it is. And because of silence, we are losing a lot of things in our workforce. Because of silence, people are withholding information, leaders are losing vital information, innovation slows down, and people start hiding mistakes. But the worst thing is that silence becomes a norm. But there are two words that can turn ordinary leadership into extraordinary results. And with these two words, if you change your behaviors in your culture will be transformed. And they're very simple words. But before I share with you what those words are, I want to help you understand why silence is so costly and how it's showing up in our organizations. And I want to start by sharing a story about a time early in my career when I realized how devastating silence could be. It was my first headshot. Now, this headshot was so important to me. It was going to mark my place in history. Someone would capture a picture that would last for eternity, so I thought. And so it was very important to me. I prepared for this headshot. I was groomed, my hair was in place, every speck of clothing was perfect, and I walked into that very confidently. Now, the photographer in this process was not very friendly. He was busy, he had a lot on his mind, didn't smile at me, we didn't have a lot of conversation. But he kind of barked orders at me. And when I thought he was ready to take my picture, I smiled as big as I could, had my shoulders up, my chin was up, and I smiled in front of the camera and click. He took the first picture and looked at the image, looked very disappointed. Wasn't very happy with that image. And he said, sit there, put your feet here, keep your chin up. So I thought, oh, I'll comply. I want to make the leader happy. And so as I did that, I raised my shoulders, raised my chin even higher, smiled so prominently that every tooth was showing, and I was trying to help him out to make this a great moment. Click. Took the next picture. Looked even more disappointed. And he was frustrated, maybe even a little bit angry. And he said, that's no good. Let's try it again. And so he tried it again. And this time he said something that shocked me. He said, don't smile. And I thought, I was really disappointed. And this is the image that he captured. Now, that is the image, of someone who is not happy, who's frustrated, who is not happy with the situation. And there's a little bit of anger in that expression. This is the image of a 7-year-old girl who was silenced. And I have no doubt that you have seen this look on the faces of people you work with when they've been silenced. This is what silence looks like. And what happens with silence? We can't see what's underneath, but these are some of the things that happen with silence. People don't share their concerns. They're not sharing ideas. They don't challenge decisions. So these are the things that we can't see. So how do we know when silence is happening? Well, here are some of the symptoms. People start withdrawing. People start disengaging. And they become frustrated, and it's frequent. So what does that look like in your organization when people are frustrated, when they're disengaging? Well, it might look like this. They might come to meetings, but their head is buried in their work, on their laptops or on their phones. They may not show up at meetings. They may not respond to your emails. I hear that quite a bit within organizations. People are ghosting. Now, and even though you send them about 20 emails a day, they just aren't responding. So that is a problem. And all of these things show up in your organization because people are silenced. So how is silence showing up in your organization? I'd like you to take a moment or two just to find a partner or a group of people to answer that question. How is silence showing up in your organization? One of these symptoms we talked about, are people frustrated? Are people not able to speak? Are they not sharing concerns? Share your personal story. So go ahead and find a partner and take a minute or two to discuss that.
I've been on the end of silent at times, and I definitely can feel that frustration. For me, it shows up when I'm working with someone who questions everything. I feel like my agency is taking over. I know it's wrong. It's just my personality. So I get it.
I think at that point they're just, I think too when someone's silent it shows that they don't necessarily care.
I agree. I feel myself starting to check out in this occasion.
Because I know that, like in certain jobs I've had even, like if I don't believe in the mission or, it's not the place, it's easy to just kind of be like, you know.
For me, it's more like my contribution gets like,
I agree.
I like the technical going, that's bad. So, if my contribution is okay,
Exactly.
as I get older, the
30
more
seconds to wrap it up.
let that happen.
And I think doing sales is kind of the toughest part of it. From the contribution standpoint, it's really never, you know how it is.
And you can't disengage from the client.
Do you identify some more symptoms than the ones that we've talked about so far? Did you notice something that happened as a result of all of you sharing? Did you notice that the noise level in the room went up? This happened because everybody in the room who participated in this and answered the question were engaged. That's what engagement looks like. So a lot of times we throw that word around, disengagement, and it's a big concern, but this is what engagement looks like. When I moved to a new area, we went into a new school system, and I was offered the opportunity to go and observe the classrooms. And first graders, that was really important to me. That was a pivotal year. And I observed 2 different classrooms. I went into the one, and there were desks neatly in order, no papers disheveled on the desk. Students had their hands on their desks, and they were listening intently to the teacher. And it just seemed like a great environment. And I thought, oh, this must be the best environment for my children. Then I went in and observed the second classroom. Now, there was a guinea pig over in the corner making a lot of noise, kind of smelling a little bit. The desks weren't neatly in order. There were some crumpled up papers, disheveled, and kids were out of their seats and doing all kinds of things. But as I observed that teacher teaching, I realized that those kids were out of their seats because they were asking questions and they were engaged in what the teacher was saying. Now, she allowed for a little bit more chaos, and sometimes we think that silence is orderly. But when people are engaged, it can be noisy and it can be a little bit messy. And so that is what we're hoping for. That's what we're striving for, to get people engaged. And yes, there might be a little more chaos, And we might have to quiet people down, or we might have to temper it, but that is what we want. So if you're not sure if you have a silence problem in your organization, here's one way to check. So if you're having meetings and it sounds like a podcast where only one person has the mic, you probably have an issue. So this is one way to check, but there's some other ways we'll talk about. But first, let's talk about more of the cost of silence. What is it costing you? One of the biggest costs is people hide mistakes. When there's no psychological safety, nobody's going to come forth and say, I did this, and they're afraid of retribution, they're afraid of getting fired, and they don't want to be embarrassed, right? People hide mistakes because they just want to fit in, and they want to blend in. And this happened at Wells Fargo Bank many years ago. And in this situation, they were incentivizing and putting a lot of pressure on their employees to sell a lot of different products in the bank. And they were incentivized, and there was so much pressure on that some of the employees decided to create false accounts with their clients' names. But when the clients started getting bills for services they hadn't selected, it triggered an investigation. And Wells Fargo lost billions of dollars, and 5,000 people lost their jobs. This went on for 5 years. And so this was a hidden mistake that went on for 5 years, and it was devastating. Another cost is disengagement. We all saw how happy and satisfied people looked with engagement. You were talking to each other. I saw a lot of smiles. I saw the noise level raised. But when people are disengaged, it's quiet, and it's just a little bit eerie. We don't want people to be disengaged. And then we have attrition. And not just people leaving, but your star performers are leaving when there's silence. And finally, that financial loss to the organization. Again, another Gallup research poll says that $3,400 out of every $10,000 of an employee's salary is lost in productivity due to disengagement. So it's a huge financial loss. So silence becomes costly, and it becomes noise. Now, the problem with noise is we hear it, and it's kind of annoying at first when we hear noise, but then we put it in the background. It just becomes background, and we don't pay attention to it. And that's why it's dangerous, because we're no longer aware that silence may be a problem. We need to understand the reasons for silence. Why do people stay quiet? One of the reasons I started my business, Communicating Matters, was because I sat in many meetings with very smart, brilliant people, but they weren't saying anything. There were times when information was not correct, and nobody challenged that information. And I wanted to start a business in which I could encourage people to speak up and challenge ideas and not be afraid to do those kinds of things. One of the biggest reasons that people stay silent is fear. And this is social fear. We want to fit in. It's more comfortable to fit in, right? We like to do this. Sometimes we just want to make everybody happy. We want to avoid conflict, so we just agree with the whole group. Solomon Asch did an experiment. He was a professor of psychology at Swarthmore College in the 1950s and conducted many trials. And he drew 3 lines on a board. One line was the obvious longest one, and he asked participants to identify the longest line. Now, he recruited some participants to answer incorrectly. But the ones who weren't recruited for that were influenced by those who answered incorrectly. So 75% of the time, the ones that knew the right answer answered incorrectly. And the reason was social pressure. So he was studying group dynamics and social pressure, and found that people were influenced by what the group was doing because they wanted to be part, they didn't want to be wrong, they wanted to be included, they wanted that sense of belonging. Another reason is because of past negative experiences. Well, if you did speak up and you said something and nothing was done about it, or perhaps maybe you were even challenged, you may not want to speak up again. And if it happens once or twice, yeah, you're probably never going to speak up again. A third reason is because there's no channel. And channel is just sometimes access to a leader who could do something about it. It could be a missing process for sharing something wrong that's going on. And then finally, sometimes leaders just talk too much. They don't give the opportunity to listen, to get feedback from their team members. But leaders can make a big difference, and they can turn up the volume. And one way they can do this, using 2 words, and that's to speak up. Because when you encourage your team members to speak up, every voice will strengthen the team. Those 2 important words, speak up. Speaking up will disrupt the silence. And that's what we want. We want the silence to be broken. 2 strategies I'm going to give you today that will help you encourage your team members to speak up. If you embed this into your culture, you will see changes right away. And those 2 are questions and feedback. So what do questions do? Well, they invite discussion. When we ask a question, we have to stop and listen for the response, right? And it also shows someone that we're interested in what they have to say. So if one of the things I used to tell people when I was coaching people on how to give presentations, I would say the best thing, other than applause, applause is nice, but people kind of expect to do that. But if you get a question after you've spoken, that's the real reward, because you have piqued someone's curiosity. So questions show that you were interested enough to listen. It shows that you're interested in the person, and it invites discussion. Adam Grant is one of my favorite authors and has written a book called Think Again, one of his early books. And in that book, he shares a story about a 4th grade art teacher who encouraged his students to improve on their projects by giving each other peer feedback. So he taught the children how to ask questions and then to give feedback. So they'd ask questions like, well, did you think about using a different shape? Why did you use this shape? Or what about this technique? Did you consider that? And then they would give critique on the art projects. And what he found is in every iteration, the art projects became better and better. And what I find most exciting, so that was a great result in and of itself, but what I find most exciting is that 4th graders were learning how to ask questions and give feedback in a safe way. It became a habit for them, and it was very natural, and they had that to carry with them all of their lives. Now, feedback is another important one. But with questions, we open the door to a lot of insights, innovation, and we open the door to the courage to speak up. But feedback is also important. Feedback is, if you do it well and routinely, people will begin to crave it. John Miller's here today, and John and I were in a Toastmasters group together, and I loved it whenever John was the one assigned to give feedback. And I remember one particular time when John gave me feedback, and he said, Cheri, I loved when you called out Dave and Adrian. That was a great way of getting our attention and making it relevant to your topic. I thought, oh, this is great. And then he gave me another comment that was a correction. And I wrote it down, but I don't remember it. However, I remember the first comment he made because he gave me some positive reinforcement. He told me something I was doing well that I should continue doing. So John was my go-to person. I loved his feedback. And because of that, I trust John because he was able to give me supportive feedback and corrective feedback. And if you do that with your leaders, it will become safe, and they will eventually crave it. Now, I craved feedback, and I attribute that to a lot of my success. That 7-year-old girl you saw earlier started learning to play the piano when she was 7 years old. So even though she was silenced in that situation, she found a form of self-expression, and it happened through an instrument. And she realized, you know what, people like to listen to me when I play the piano. And she became better and better, and then in high school, she took lessons from a graduate of Juilliard. And that teacher demanded perfection, mastery. So every song every piece that she played had to be mastered. And so with feedback and with practice, she was able to, she practiced 4 to 5 hours a day. And with that, she was able to enter a scholarship competition and played a concerto with the Maryland Symphony Orchestra. So that was a great accomplishment, and it was all because of feedback. And that feedback motivated her to practice more. So when you help your leaders, when you help your team members with feedback, they will start craving it more and more. The questions make us curious, right? So curiosity sparks voices. People, if we are curious with other people, they will speak up. And voices spark the change that we want. But speaking up requires preparation and practice. And I want you to remember that preparation, it's just like any sport or art form. You have to learn the skill first, but then you have to practice it and reinforce it, and you need the feedback, so you need all three. And Tyler Evans is one person who was ready when it mattered most. And with our teams, we need to prepare them and help them practice. And you might say, well, what does that look like? Well, I know it's kind of odd to say, how do I have people practice speaking up? Well, in multiple ways, but one way is just to ask questions, to ask them for feedback, so invite feedback, because it will be safe for them to receive feedback if you're inviting it yourself. But there are many strategies for doing that, but it's important to prepare them and to practice, because you want them ready when they need it most. And Tyler Evans is a great example of this. In 2008, I was teaching at the University of Findlay in Findlay, Ohio. And we had a Division II team, men's basketball, who had gone through the whole season undefeated. And it was a very exciting time on campus. And we were all geared to watch this championship game. Many people went up to Massachusetts to watch it. And it was a very exciting game. But the championship game was like the game that would never end. They went into so many overtimes, and we had to wait and wait and wait to see the outcome because the score was tied. In the last few minutes of the last overtime, our star player, Josh Bostic, fouled out and had to sit on the bench. They brought in Tyler Evans, who had been sitting on the bench most of the game, but he was ready to play. He hadn't scored the whole game, but he was ready. And he was ready because even before the season began, they started practicing, doing drills, getting the reps in, and they trusted each other. They kind of knew each other, where each person would be. They knew the plays. And Coach Niekamp would give them great feedback, supportive feedback, and instructive feedback. So in the last few seconds of the game, Tyler Evans comes in. Somebody throws him the ball. The buzzer's about to ring. And Tyler Evans makes a three-point shot and wins the game. He won the game not because he's the greatest player in the world, but because he was ready. And that's what I want. Nobody expected him to do it. In fact, he was a bench warmer most of the game. And so nobody expected that out of him. But every member on that team was that prepared to take the shot when they needed to. And that's what you want for your team members. Now, the preparation builds confidence. And a lot of times people are afraid to speak up because they don't have the confidence. The competence comes because of the practice, because of practicing that skill. Now, practice doesn't make you perfect, but practice can make you prepared. And in that preparation, we need to have habits, right? Habits create the courage. If you want your team members to be courageous and to speak up, you need to have habits formed. So they're prepared, you've given them feedback, you've done all of these things, but those habits have to be consistent to have the courage to speak up when it counts most. There was a young man, his name was Chris Nivick, and he had prepared for the triathlon. And he had done this by using the approach of getting 1% better every day. Now what's interesting about, he completed the triathlon, did a great job, but what's interesting is he was the first person with Down syndrome to complete the triathlon. Now, most people say he had a huge disadvantage. It's not something people would normally do who have Down syndrome, But he was able to accomplish it because he had a method, he had a habit. And that habit gave him the ability to perform when he needed to, but also gave him the courage. I had a speak up moment that came to me because I had built over many years the courage to speak up. And sometimes you're speaking up for yourself, and sometimes you speak up for other people. But if you have those habits formed, you've done the preparation, you'll be ready to speak up when it's needed most. Now, I found myself on a committee, and I prepared myself for the discussion that was coming up. And as I did that, I went into the committee expecting one of the senior leaders who were there to facilitate the whole meeting. That didn't happen. Somebody started the meeting, but then one person in the group dominated the entire conversation. Now, we were supposed to have this discussion that would lead to a decision on whether we would spend an allocation of $1 million. And I thought that was a pretty big deal, but nobody else was giving their voice. Nobody could because somebody was dominating the whole conversation. And to make matters worse, this person had an ally in the room, and they were chiming in too. And so at one point, I heard false information, and I felt like we need to make a decision based on accurate information. So I heard false information, and then I heard this person dominating the conversation, demeaning people who weren't even there to speak up for themselves. So someone in the room had to speak up, so I did. And I spoke up, I shared my information in a polite, respectful way, but in an assertive, direct way. And I said, here's the information I have, and shared my information. Now, they made the decision not to spend the $1 million, just based on a lot of other things, but it was important for someone to speak up. And oftentimes, I was told after that meeting, somebody came up to me and said, you know, I'm so glad you spoke up. I really wanted to do that. I just didn't feel right about doing it. And that's happened to me multiple times when I've spoken up. And I've realized when I have that need to speak up, I'm going to have the courage to do that because I'm usually not just speaking up for myself. I'm usually representing ideas that other people have, and I'm speaking on their behalf. So remember that when you're speaking up for your ideas and the ideas of other people. And this is an image of a young person who just is not really overt and animated like this, but we gave her one prompt. We said, you know, give us your best Simba. And she posed like this, just with every ounce of energy. Never seen her do this before, but this is what happens when people speak up. This is what it looks like. Now, I'm so thrilled today to be able to share this with you, but I crave your feedback. So if you would give me some feedback by using this QR code, I would appreciate it. And in a moment, I'm going to ask you a few questions because I'd love for you to continue this conversation and take some action today. So if you would take some action and answer one of these questions, and you can answer it with a partner or you can visit with one another and challenge each other. But if you would take one of these actions, somehow find a way to reward somebody who's speaking up. Number two, ask more questions. So that's a real easy one. Just ask more questions, be curious. Number three, invite feedback. So ask people for feedback about how you're doing, and not just, how am I doing? You know, tell me how great I am. A lot of people feel real comfortable with that, and that's okay. If that's how you want to start. Sometimes that's a good way to start with inviting feedback, but ask them specific questions like, you know, I didn't think this meeting went very well. What could we have done either with the agenda or in the facilitation? What could we have done better? Can you give me some input? And those are the kinds of specific questions that will get you the feedback you need. And finally, take action on times when you need to speak up for other people. And I know many of you in here personally do advocacy work, and I love that you're here. China's up here, and she does a lot of advocacy work. She speaks up for others who can't or won't. So take one of these actions today. Thank you for your time and attention. Thank you for allowing me to be here. I want to make one last comment. I'm so grateful for First Fridays in my life. I moved here in 2019, and one of the First Friday meetings I came to, I met Emily. Is Emily here?
Yeah.
Okay. Where is she? Yeah. Okay, Emily, okay, great, Emily's here. So I met Emily, we were heading out to the parking lot together, and I just said, oh, I'm new to town, and we were just chatting, and she said, oh, I work at Stillwater Hospice, and I said, oh, that's nice, and I didn't know anything about hospice at the time. And so we had a one-on-one meeting, and she's just delightful, so if you haven't met her yet, please make sure you meet her. But we talked about hospice. She told me all the things that they do here at Stillwater. It just sounded like a great place. Well, I didn't know in 2 months, my mother was declining in her health, and we needed to start having conversations about how to offer more support for my dad. And I had to make a phone call to hospice in Maryland to find out what we do, what are the steps that we need to take. And because of this wonderful conversation I had with Emily, I was able to go through these steps. I knew who to call, what to do, and we were more prepared because of that. So there are many things, and I do think that was providential, that we had that conversation, and that's one of the reasons I came back to First Fridays. So thank you for the opportunity for letting me be here. Please take one of these actions today. Megan, do you have any questions?
Can you go back to your QR code?
Oh, sure.
Thanks.
Yes. Yeah, there are lots of questions. You don't have to answer all of them, and it only takes about 5 seconds. But thank you. Thanks.
Don't run away.
Okay.
We're going to ask questions if
Okay.
anybody has any questions for you, because you had a lot of good stuff go on up there.
You still play piano?
I do. I just for my dog and my husband. Yeah, I love it. It's music. If you're a musician, it's just in you and it never leaves.
That was the intro question, kind of a yes or no. And help me understand or give me some advice when we as a leader are in a situation where something hasn't happened. And I was in a meeting yesterday where there was supposed to be some follow-up, and I found out the night before that it had not been done. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I let the team down. It's not happening. I'm so frustrated. How do I even approach this? But give us some suggestions as to how you would say, okay, I know this didn't quite go as planned, but any suggestions there when you know that things aren't going the way you thought they should be
So
going?
you're not the one running the meeting, someone else is?
I was the one running the meeting, but things hadn't been done that I was told were done, and I found out just before the meeting that it wasn't, and I'm like all the wind's out of my sail. Like, I'm frustrated. How do I move forward?
Well, feedback is one thing. Asking questions. A lot of times people who drop the ball like that, there could be reasons you don't know about. So asking the question, just say, why is this done? How could I have helped you? What did you need from me? So putting it on ourselves first, but then trying to get to the root of the problem. I worked with a client who was a comptroller for an organization, and somebody was making mistakes. So 2 different people. One was making the same mistake. The other person was making a lot of different mistakes. And so I said, why don't you have the person who's making the different mistakes show you how they arrived at that answer? She was a little controlling and wanted everybody to do it her way. But I said, ask them to show you that process so that you can figure out and help her realize where they made the mistake. So that would be one of my suggestions, Denise, is an open conversation. We don't always need to have those in private. Sometimes that needs to be general. If it's a close enough group, it could be, hey, how could we all make this happen better? And I assume it was volunteers.
It was, but I don't work.
And that's
Which
even,
makes it harder.
it does, yeah. Yeah, and it could be a private conversation about, how committed are you to doing this? Because we're all relying on people to have this done by a certain time.
Thank you.
Yeah,
That's all.
yeah, conversations, questions, feedback. There are lots more strategies I have, but those are the 2 I talked about today.
Thank you.
Yes?
What suggestions would you have for individuals on your team that are maybe introverted, that aren't as comfortable as our extroverted coworkers at providing that feedback?
Okay, so how do you help introverts speak up more?
Yeah.
Great question. So questions, asking them questions. So it feels comfortable to answer, and they have to speak up when you ask them a question, right? And they get used to that. That becomes the norm. They get used to the fact that oh, this leader is going to ask me a question. I better have something ready. So that's one thing. The other thing is it could be a private conversation when I work with people who are trying to run for an office. One of the things I tell them, every time you go into a meeting, make sure people know you're in the room, right? So say something, let them know your name, but say something, ask a question, make a comment. It's one of those muscles where they have to kind of have those routines over, putting the reps in, just like the basketball player, putting the reps in and doing it, being conscious of it. So if you could guide them that way, give them some goals. Hey, I want you to speak up at least 2 times in this meeting. Or, yes, ask a question. Questions are easy, but questions are powerful. Questions can guide the whole discussion in a different direction. And questions also are affirming. They let us know as a leader, somebody's listening. So questions are a real good tool to pick up. Yeah.
What would you recommend if we have a leader on our team that is that leader that talks 90% of the time? How do you politely tell them, we love that you're engaged, but you're overpowering everyone else in a way that doesn't feel like criticism?
I think that's a perfect way to give feedback, right? It's a very positive way. Yes, we know that you're engaged, and also telling them how they could make the change. I just talked to someone recently who's a leader in an organization, and the CEO talks too much and doesn't give them time to listen. So he gave that feedback. So the CEO is really trying to do it, but he only waits a few seconds. So you might say, wait 10 seconds to let somebody answer, or answer last, like you pose a question and be the last one to respond. But I think the way you worded it is a great script, so I would use that. Hi, Deb.
A follow-up to Denise's question to you. How do you take care of that without them feeling like you're micromanaging them?
Well, I think the series of questions would help guide them without feeling like they're micromanaged. When people are micromanaged, you're dictating things. But when you're asking questions, you're guiding them to discover what their own problem is. And if you have to point it out to them, then so be it. But I consider that not micromanaging. So, yeah, but I think asking questions, and it sounds like you're all volunteers in Denise's case, and she's just running the volunteer group, so they're all at the same level, and I think a friendly conversation.
So asking in the middle, let's say her project was for a month to get it done. So is it wrong to kind of check through the month to say, how are things going?
Oh, absolutely.
So it's not a micromanage feeling that they may be getting?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I bet Denise does that. Yes, I know. I know. She's efficient.
Yes, she does.
Right. Yeah, those check-ins. Emily.
If there's anyone in the room who has maybe been silenced in the past, and that can be hard to get over even at a new employer, do you have any suggestions for someone to really rebuild their confidence, whether they're in the same organization or another?
Yes, so if you're a leader, finding allies is really important. If you're not a leader and you just want to speak up and just have influence, then again, it's those micro steps, and it may be just easing into it, just saying, okay, at this meeting I'm going to have a goal, I'm going to make one comment and ask one question, and then just increasing it. So just doing it incrementally until it becomes comfortable for you. Just committing to not staying silent. When I work with the political candidates, it's so uncomfortable for them to walk into a meeting and speak up, because they've been doing the work behind the scenes and they're really good at it and they're passionate about it, but that's a habit they need to form. So I would say it's a habit. Create that habit of just speaking. I know some people are introverts. You mentioned some introverts, and when they go to networking meetings, it's really stressful, right? And so I know they say, okay, I'm going to make a goal, I'm going to meet 2 new people, and I'm going to have a conversation with 2 people. And that's my goal, and then I can leave. So just creating the habit, having those goals. Ryan?
So especially if you're new to this concept as a leader, once you start practicing this, right, it becomes impossible to plan for everything the team could say to you, right? So you go from order to chaos. Do you have any tips for veteran leaders or for people new to this concept on how to handle that uncertainty of what am I going to get and handle it gracefully, like a parking lot, or just different techniques so that the leader can feel safe in having such an open environment? Because often leaders feel like they need to know everything already. And it's very hard to have that open atmosphere when you don't know what you're going to get. Right?
So are you talking about the uncertainty of getting a barrage of questions or comments?
Techniques
feedback?
for that leader to feel more comfortable, what they can do for that open environment, because especially in complex organizations, you know, there's just so many things once that safety is there that people could speak up, and
Right.
it's hard to facilitate a meeting without, you know, it's easier to have all the answers in a script, and once you start having an open environment, you're just never going to be able to have all the answers. So what are techniques that you coach leaders on so that, you know, they know how to handle that gracefully, not feeling like they have to have every answer in that meeting or that
Right.
situation?
And I think that's the answer, is letting people know I don't have all the answers, because I need your input to come up with the right solution. And so just off the bat, I can't know all the answers, but I'll get the information. I know there was somebody in an organization I worked with, somebody in HR, and she was wonderful. With the first day of my orientation, she said, "Cheri, if you have any questions, just ask me." I said, "Really, any question?" And I tested her a couple of times. I thought, yeah, she's not going to answer. But yeah, she's like, "No, if I don't have the answer, I'll go find it for you." And I think that's the spirit of a leader. Yeah, I don't always have the answers, but I will connect you with the person. We will get connected with the right person. And just knowing that you'll do that on their behalf.
May I add an addendum to what you
Yes.
said? Early in my career, selling insurance to highly compensated healthcare professionals and some attorneys, and I looked like a baby. And I walked into these most intimidating circumstances. Commission was really high to compensate me for the bloody noses I took every day. Until someone finally said to you, and this back in the day, long before you, son, when every legal office had libraries of books in their conference rooms. They said, you ask an attorney a question, and they say, I'll get the answer and get back with you. And it occurred to me, the people we leave at the highest level and the pinnacles of our admiration, that they're experts and know everything, give you the same answer every time. I'll get back with you and get you the answer. You don't have to know all the answers. You have to know how to go get the answer. And when you say with confidence, I'll get you the answer, the pressure's off of you and you'll have a successful meeting.
And you'll build trust if you do get back to them. And that's a big thing too.
I've been in situations where, because I can talk a lot, you know, I'm ideas, but for example, this monthly meeting, I felt like I was talking too much, so I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna shut up. Like, the next meeting I'm gonna say. And one of the most like strict men in the group, after a couple months came to me and said, what happened, Marta? You haven't been saying anything. We need your voice. So how do you, if you feel like you talk too much, you're always opinionated, you know, and someone actually surprises you and tell you they need your voice, how do you stop from being taken over?
So Marna's asking, how do you know if you think you talk too much, how do you know if you are, and when to stop? Well, one way is to ask someone that you trust to give you feedback. Just say, here are my goals, here's what I want to accomplish, and I want to know if I'm talking too much. Here's why I think I'm talking too much. Would you give me feedback? And that's a great way to start. Just asking for multiple people's feedback. And if you're contributing in a positive way to the group, keep speaking up.
Thank you. Let's give Dr. Cheri a round of applause. Awesome job, awesome job. So now this is my time to shut up. So great message. What are some of the nuggets that you guys took away from this? Anybody?
To actually ask for feedback.
To actually ask for feedback, it's a good one. Sometimes it's scary.
Silence is costly.
Silence is costly.
So when someone says thoughts, questions, concerns, you should actually express your thoughts, questions, and concerns.
Everybody hear that? If someone says, hey, do you have any thoughts, questions, or concerns? Actually give them to them. Don't just walk away and be like, I have some, but I'm not telling you. Right. What else you guys got?
Preparation brings confidence, practice brings competence.
Love that. That was a good one. Yes,
I
ma'am.
restructure my team meetings so that, you know, as our standing agenda items, it's not always me presenting the information. So, you know, develops my team, encourages them, you know, to research that topic and provide feedback and lead the team in those areas that they're stronger in.
I love it. So you're taking action. You're walking out here and changing stuff. I love that. What else? No social judgment here.
I've been a little bit more personally, I found myself walking away without saying anything, like, and that being more valuable to me versus like the effort on changing anything, and realizing more of like how much of a disservice that is generally to the bigger picture, and to change that going forward. And I appreciate like the baby step, the one or two things I can do moving forward in order to make a difference.
That's awesome. Thank you. So with that, I'm going to close out. So just to reiterate, what action are you going to take? Make sure you give Cheri feedback. You're going to be around for a little bit, answer some questions. So take advantage of that. And then, so next month, we have Audrey Anderson coming in, and she's nutrition, health, fitness, and the one thing with First Fridays that we always focus on is mind, body, and spirit. It's all of those things, is how can we really invest in you as a person, because as leaders, we pour out a lot to others, but sometimes we just don't take enough time for ourselves. So every time that we have a speaker up here, we want to make sure that you learn something that you can take that's actionable and make you a better person every month. So with Audrey, she's also a Tony Robbins geek, which I am too. So I look forward to her presentation next month. So please see us same time, same place next month, First Friday. Or actually, sorry, I screwed that up because of the holiday and the new year. It's the second Friday. They made it easy for me and then I messed it up. So anyhow, so January 9th, take a picture, make sure you have this, put it in your calendar. It's going to be a good time. And then again, we do all this throughout the year, and then June is our big wellness event. And again, we focus on the mind, body, spirit, and then also finance, because we talk about finance, we talk about faith, we talk about the health of you as a person. So make sure you guys sign up for that and get involved. It's a great time. We get a lot of groups together to better us as First Fridays. So with that, take the last little bit of time, meet someone new, especially Emily. She sounds like she's pretty cool. So, and I'm just going to give a shout out. So me and Emily have known each other for a long time. Youth for Christ, when you were over there, right? Is that when we met? A long time ago. So, but everything circles back around, and First Fridays we came back here, and Stillwater Hospice allowed us to be in this event space, and she was a key piece of that. Just knowing her and the stuff that she does and what we do as First Fridays, it's crazy how close we are as a community. And if you just build those relationships and care and love, and go back to what we talked about at the beginning, is speak up, have conversations, network with everybody, and you guys have a blessed holiday. Thank you.